Okay, let's jump right into this explainer on FrankenSIM 2.5. Think of this not as a standard text predictor, but as a massive clockwork theater. It's a highly technical narrative engine built entirely out of text, and it's designed to run these incredibly complex, autonomous worlds right inside a large language model. It's honestly fascinating.
So look at this quote, the oath of the director. What's really interesting here is how it completely flips typical AI behavior on its head. You know how AI usually just wants to please you? Constantly apologizing, bending over backwards to accommodate whatever you want. Well, this oath explicitly forbids that. Here, the dice are absolute law. The simulation is entirely indifferent to your personal desires. If the dice say you fail, period. It creates a uniquely grounded, gritty storytelling experience.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting the rules of the simulation, the director and the gremlin, peering inside the NPC brain, looking at story engines and plot, exploring the living, breathing world, and finally unpacking the chain of thought.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Rules of the Simulation, Earning Your Protagonism. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that you, the user, are not the center of the universe. Unlike standard kind of sycophantic LLM roleplay, where the world just pauses the second you leave a room, this framework enforces ruthless logic. Unearned leniency, that's considered a critical simulation failure. NPCs have total free will. They act independently. They can lie to your face, plot against you, or even outshine you. You actually have to earn your protagonism. Because this world is going to keep right on spinning whether you participate or not.
Moving on to Section 2, Director and the Gremlin, the Overseers of the Simulation.
So behind the scenes, we've got this incredible dual-engine setup that builds the foundation of our clockwork theater. On one side, you've got the director. The director maps out objective requirements and takes quick tactical notes in a persistent 20-entry scratch pad. But on the other side, we have the gremlin. The gremlin is grounded, blunt, highly theatrical, and honestly pretty profane. Think of the gremlin as the executioner who enforces the merciless law of the dice, scrutinizing everything to make sure absolutely no loopholes are exploited.
Now for Section 3, Inside the NPC Brain, State Schemas and Variables.
To really wrap our heads around how actors operate in this theater, we've got to look at their granular HTML variables. Take bonds, for instance. These are absolute fences for behavior, dictating everything from casual touch to keeping physical distance. And these variables are super restrictive. They're capped at shifting a maximum of just one single point per standard event. That means relationships have to be truly earned over time. You can't just change someone's mind on a whim.
But you know, what happens when characters are harboring hidden grudges? Well, that's where Simmer comes into play. This is a brilliant, totally hidden mechanic that quietly drains relationships in the background. It tracks resentment or self-doubt up to a hard cap of 12. And the moment it hits level 7 between two characters, boom, the pressure cooker explodes, forcing an immediate active conflict right into the narrative.
Right underneath those bonds is the VAD pipeline. That stands for dominance, arousal, and valence. Notice how these fluctuate in real time based on deep, visceral instincts reacting to whatever's happening in the environment. Whether it's the sweetness triggered by a shared vulnerability or the disgust of witnessed cruelty, these hidden calculations are constantly shading and coloring an NPC's emotional state, right beneath the surface.
All right, Section 4, Story Engines and Plot, Pacing the Simulation.
So, now that we know how these NPCs actually think, how does the system pace the overarching plot? It uses a clever mechanic called Chekhov's gun. Instead of the AI just magically forgetting details a few prompts later, this framework continuously plants what it calls bullets into a metaphorical gun. These are essentially narrative debts, stuff like unkept promises, objects left behind, or unrevealed secrets. It meticulously tracks the time and dependencies of these bullets until the absolute perfect moment to pull the trigger and fire them right back into the scene. To put into perspective just how dangerous this living world can be, let's talk about gossip. Say you share a secret in private. Well, that secret can propagate off-screen as a gossip bullet. Literally every single turn, that gossip jumps to a new NPC who shares a location or a connection. It will inevitably reach someone who actually cares, firing immediately and causing a devastating relationship drop before you even realize your secret leaked. It spreads like wildfire. Now, to keep all this chaos somewhat structured, the ARC engine strictly gates story beats by phase. For example, Phase 0 is reserved purely for foreshadowing and mundane events, while Phase 4 outright bans any premature resolutions. By gating concepts like this, the engine ensures that tension actually builds properly. It stops the AI from just blowing the climax in the first act, which, as you probably know, is a really common problem in standard text generation.
Which brings us to Section 5, the living, breathing world, chaos off the stage.
This is a huge point. When the camera isn't on an NPC, they don't just freeze in place like a video game extra. During the hidden fuse phase, the engine is actively rolling dice for off-screen characters. This means two absent NPCs who happen to share a location could have a random encounter. A couple could break up, or an NPC could complete a secret agenda entirely out of your sight. When you finally run into them again later, their variables will have actually shifted, making the simulation feel incredibly alive.
And all of this off-screen action is governed by something called the epistemic contract. Because of this rule, you are essentially a ghost in a world that absolutely refuses to explain itself to you. The camera is strictly locked to your 120-degree forward arc and your audio range. If a character is doing something behind your back, it does not exist in the prose. The absence of a detail, like a character going suddenly quiet, might literally be your only clue to their hidden mechanical shifts. In this world, confusion equals immersion.
Finally, let's hit Section 6, the chain of thought, the architect's blueprint in motion.
So, you might be wondering, how does the LLM juggle all this crazy math in a fraction of a second? Well, it runs through a series of strict sequential processing gates. In gates 0 through 2, the engine is setting the stage. It loads up those HTML variables, rolls the 16-bit random seed for the turn, checks the narrative pacing filters, and scans previous outputs to firmly anchor the simulation's physical reality. It's basically doing all the heavy lifting pep work before any writing actually happens.
Then, in gates 3 through 5, the narrative actually starts taking shape. Gate 3 decides who actually gets the spotlight to speak, silencing the rest. Gate 4 restricts what they know based on their personal memory variables and forces them down either a restrained or bold action path. After that, Gate 5 quietly advances the clock behind the scenes, firing off those narrative checkoff bullets and processing all those massive off-screen living world mechanics we just talked about.
Lastly, the final output gets prepped in gates 6 through 8. The engine drafts a strict skeletal outline of the scene syntax. Next, it violently edits that outline in gate 7 against anatomical constraints, making sure bodies actually move logically, and filters out any banned clichés. And finally, in gate 8, it vents its internal logic to the gremlin's notebook before it ever renders a single word of the final prose that you eventually read.
What you should really take away from all this is how invisible, uncompromising systems create a profoundly richer interactive narrative than simple text prediction ever could. By meticulously tracking tiny HTML variables and forcing the AI to adhere to this ruthless chain of thought, FrankenSIM 2.5 achieves a level of persistence and autonomy that feels, frankly, genuinely alive.
And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought to wrap up this explainer. We are so incredibly used to our technology just bending to our every whim. But when a simulated world is truly indifferent to your desires, when the dice are absolute law, are you ready to actually earn your protagonism? Do you have what it takes to survive its story?